Made a big mistake of not checking. That's what happens when you don't check. Yo, how am I sounding? Hopefully I'm sounding okay. I mean, that's really what I get. We'll check right now. Let's just make sure everything's above board, shall we? On the stream. Check right now. Let's just make sure everything's above board, shall we? Yeah, everything's above board. Welcome to tonight's show. We're talking Stooges. It's been a while since we've talked about the Stooges, Iggy and the Stooges, Iggy Pop. Tonight is wow, yeah, this is interesting. Man, I've had this story bookmarked for some time. I remember when this happened or surfaced or whatever. This was kind of a big deal. I don't know if it was kind of a big deal. I mean, who really, outside of people who are really into the Stooges? I mean, there's plenty of people that are into the Stooges, but in any case, it's been 5 years. It's been 5 years. This is cool though. This is a story of lost lore, of lost treasure being found. You know, there's two types of lost treasure, I think. That's how I want to start this. There's two types of lost treasure. The first kind of lost treasure is something that you didn't even know existed, right? You're like, oh my God, what is this? This is amazing. Look at what we have here. It's great. I'm so glad that we have it. And that's a great reward. But, you know, it's something that you were never missing in the first place. So it's found treasure. It's a found thing, and that's inherently good. But there is another type of treasure that I think might be the better of the two if we're discussing treasure. And this treasure is a type of treasure that backs up mythology, or does the opposite. It disproves mythology. And what I mean by that is, you know, lore, stories, ideas, themes, things are told by people from their point of view, right? Like, I have this point of view about this thing that happened, and so has a different point of view. We do this all the time. We talk about Misfits or Ramones or whatever the hell we're talking about. We're always talking about points of view. Points of view are how we shade and color history, you know, because at the end of the day, you know, all we can go is from people's points of view. Eyewitness account sources, right, that are documenting these things. Video was very precious and scarce in 1970. And, you know, a few decades before didn't even exist. So the idea of having an unbiased source like video, I mean, that's the thing about video. It's a pure thing. It's a thing where it's like, you know, it's not necessarily weighted. I mean, well, it depends if that's edited video. If it's edited video, that's a different story. But, you know, if you're just looking at video for the sake of video, if you're looking at the images for the sake of images, and you go, well, that is very matter-of-factly displaying that, and that is that, and that disproves that. And I'm sort of taking myself on a tangent here. What I'm trying to say is that points of view create mythology. And in the creation of that mythology, narratives are established. And what happens, though, is when you find lost treasure in the form of media, especially when it's, you know, unbiased, you have this beautiful opportunity to sort of disband, to disprove, to substantialize whatever it is that's being said. Case in point, what's being said here is that the story goes that the Stooges played the Goose Lake Festival, and Dave Alexander, founding bass player of the Stooges, was just shitting the bed. He was just not doing a good job. He wasn't playing the bass, or he was playing the bass not great, like just whatever. There were all these various different sort of things. And by the end of the show, Iggy sacked him. Iggy and by way of Iggy, the rest of the band, they sacked him. They were like, you're out of the band. And Dave Alexander, at the age of, I think he was 27 years old, was dismissed from the band that he helped to create. And eventually, shortly thereafter, drank himself to death, but it always sort of, the legend loomed large. And the legend was that Dave Alexander was just not cutting it on the bass and had to be replaced by roadie Zeke Zettner, I believe his name is. And Zeke would also go on. There were a bunch of micro lineups to the Stooges before they really the original Stooges dissolved, and then they reformed with the nucleus of Iggy Pop and James Williamson, bringing back the Ashtons as the rhythm section and calling themselves Iggy and the Stooges. And that's how Raw Power comes out. So in a weird kind of way, like, obviously the Stooges and Iggy and the Stooges are the same band fundamentally, but if you really want to get really semantical about it, it's a slight variation of the band, right? And the fact that Ron Ashton moves from being the guitar slinging hero to, the rhythm man. And, when they reformed, Ron did not want to play any of that Raw Power stuff. He just did not. And I think they started to let it slip into the set. And then when Ron died, James Williamson came back into the fold and they started playing Raw Power, but for years, for nearly a decade, they just were like, nope, just those first two records and the weirdness and whatever, So what happened was, though, going back to this idea of found media, there, we really had, the only word we had to go on was, Iggy Pop and whoever was there about Dave Alexander's bass playing. That is until the release of the Stooges live at Goose Lake 1970. And it's pretty well. Thomas, hi Thomas. Thomas just commented here. He says Iggy mentions Zeke and Dum Dum Boys. I think Dum Dum Boys is about the Ashtons, so maybe he's mentioning Zeke. I don't know what the lyrics are to Dum Dum Boys, but that's supposed to be about the Ashtons, which was off of Iggy Pop's first solo record called "The Idiot." So how did these tapes come to be is the question. And it's kind of amazing because here's the thing. There's not much, there's no real full live recordings of the original band, the original lineup that recorded those first two records. Really feel like this cohesive thing that, again, that continuity gets broken up and interrupted when they reform around Williamson and Pop with the Ashtons as the rhythm section. So that first band, there's like there are live recordings of them, but there's not like a full show, like a full cohesive show until the release of this Stooges at Goose Lake. Goose Lake is a festival in Michigan at a place called Goose Lake. Let's pull up the article. How about that? Let's pull up the article instead of me talking on the side of my neck here. Here we go. So this is from a blog. It's by Derek Phillips. It came out 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago, August 7th, 2020, from Glorious Noise. And there are the reels right there. Today marks the release of the Stooges live at Goose Lake 1970. A release so unlikely, it kind of boggles the mind. And I mean, that's the story behind how these records come out is just as impressive as the records themselves. In fact, it's half the time it's even more impressive than, and I would say, having listened to this record a few times, this live recording, the story and the historical significance far outweigh the quality and fidelity of the recording itself. It has its moments, mind you, it really does. But it is not, I would not say that it is like, it should be considered it's the only document of the band live in that kind of way. It's a snapshot. This is a snapshot of the band after they have recorded Funhouse. And we had Pete Marshall, who played a guitar for Iggy in the 90s, he came on and we talked about Funhouse at great length. I mean, that's the band when they're at the pinnacle. And the thing about Funhouse is a live recording. So if you really ever want to see what that band is at their pinnacle, you just got to listen to Funhouse, because Funhouse is that. That's what's going on. Not only are there very few live recordings of the Stooges, but this particular recording of this particular performance is so drenched in legend that to even suggest that there was a clean documentation of it sounds like a tall tale. I've been very lucky to be friends with and play in a bunch of bands with Joshua Rogers. We met in the early 90s and quickly established a musical kinship that took us through the dalliances with glam, mod, garage, Americana, and beyond. Early on, we dubbed him, quote unquote, Gadget, not just for his love of technology, but for his impeccable timing as a drummer. It's almost as if he was designed to be a drummer, programmed as such. If you knew Joshua well in those days, you also knew his dad in some way, Jim Casilli. I hope I'm saying that right. Jim loved Josh's musical projects and loved facilitating them however he could. In addition to being a king storyteller, Jim was an inventor with a specific interest in how rhythm has residual benefits related to motor skills, balance, and lots of other stuff I don't understand. The interactive metronome became a key piece of his technological legacy, something that Joshua knew well, as his dad would have him clap along with the metronome as part of his learning the drums. And the stories he would tell. Our early bands spent time recording with Joshua's dad, and that meant hours of exposure to various tales he would weave through the process of setting up for a recording session. I was a natural skeptic in my youth and basically considered, quote unquote, adults to be full of shit, especially boomers who took any opportunity to tell us how much better everything was in their day. So I was probably more dismissive to his storytelling than I had any right to be. Dad was such a legendary bullshitter that it was hard to sort of keep his story straight, Josh joked in a recent call when we caught up on this crazy adventure. As a kid, it was sometimes hard for Josh to discern fact from his dad's colorful fiction. Friends laughed at me because I told them he was a member of the Oak Ridge Boys. This bit of fantasy was likely the result of Josh's conflating some joke Jim may have told him about having sung with the Oak Ridge Boys, and the fact that he could sing in the same register to hit the most famous part of their most famous hit, Elvira. When you're a kid, sometimes you miss the nuances of the joke. There were also brushes with fame that would sometimes get jumbled up in the telling or retelling. I thought he had dated Janis Joplin, but mom says no. He, like everyone else, thought she was scuzzy. He did work with her, though, but I'm not sure to what capacity. And he did date Debbie Harry. Wait, what? Mom jokes that he chose her over Debbie Harry. That's what he would tell her. Eventually, I started to take Dad's stories with a big hunk of salt. Now, here's the box. Look at this. It says Goose Lake on it, man. And it's just full of reels of like gold. And I mean, this is the type of fantasy that every like passionate music lover hopes to come upon in some way, shape, or form. You hope and you pray and you wish for, some kind of treasure to reveal itself. And not only, as I said like 3 times already, a treasure that dispels myth or solidifies myth. The Stooges' performance at Goose Lake was pure rock and roll myth. It was the last show with the original lineup. Bassist Dave Alexander was summarily fired from the band by Iggy immediately after leaving the stage because he was so stoned or scared or whatever that he couldn't play. At least that's how the story went. But at what point does story become history? Sometimes it's just when it's been told enough times by enough people, and sometimes when there's something corroborating, sometimes it's when there's some corroborating evidence, such as the tale of how a box of tapes in a farmhouse basement in Michigan made its way to Nashville via Chicago. Now here's where the interview begins. So again, it is interesting. It's interesting how, yeah, that's what happens. Stories are told, and then stories become history. And then you need media to dispel whatever that history is, because it's now history. It's now myth. It's etched in the canon. And that's the beauty again. So of the two types of treasure we discussed, the first type of treasure, the unknown treasure, where you're like, whoa, this is so cool. I wish I had no idea that this existed, and I'm glad it exists, and blah, blah, blah. And the second type of treasure is, whoa, I wish I could hear that very legendary, famous incident caught on tape. And in this case, that happened to be the case. But before we dive into the interview, I want to take a quick moment to tell you about our sponsor, Riot Stickers. Riot Stickers is the official sponsor of the Frumess channel. We have a special deal. If you want to get stickers of Iggy Pop or Dave Alexander's face or whatever, maybe even the Stooges logo, obviously all illegally. You need to ask those people their permission for their license. But if you want to get 1,000 stickers made up of something, you can do that at riotstickers.com. You go to riotstickers.com/Frumess. That's FRUMESS. Link is down in the description. You can get 1,000 stickers for $79. That's 7 cents per sticker. These stickers are printed on vinyl. They're 3 inches by 3 inches, so it makes a nice little box. And they got a nice UV coating on them to protect them from the elements in the sun. So do not hesitate. Take advantage of this incredibly generous deal. Free shipping. Working with Sharpie is great. You're going to be blown away. Check it out. Riotstickers.com. We'll be right back with more Stooges talk.
We make stickers, banners, and buttons too. Posters and promo cards. There's nothing we can't print for you. From stage backdrops to bass drum heads. We can print on shirts. We can print on hats. We can print on pants. Cheap prices and high quality. Quick turnaround times and free shipping. We also offer free artwork support. Great customer service and so much more. RiotStickers.com. Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. RiotStickers.com. Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. RiotStickers.com. Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. RiotStickers.com. Riot Stickers, we are the bomb.
And that is a promise. Okay, let's dive into this interview, shall we? Let's dive right in, you guys. We're going to dive right in. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe this video. Glono, Glorious Noise. How did you know of the Goose Lake Music Festival? Roger says, Dad talked about it. Both parents did, not in great detail, but I remember Dad rattling off the name of bands on the bill, stuff like that. Mom's memory of the festival was that it was very seedy, dirty environment. She was from Birmingham. Haha. As I said, Josh and I have been in countless bands together over the years, and our first bands rehearsed in the basement of his family's homestead, a farmhouse in Southwest Grand Rapids that his mother's great-great-grandfather had built. It is believed to be the oldest home in Kent County. The Rogers Mansion, as it has been come to known, had a basement broken into 3 sections, and one day we decided to move our rehearsal space to the middle section, which meant moving all of the antiques, files, and boxes from one section to the other. Glorious Noise says, my first memory of those tapes is probably in 92 or 93, when we moved from one section of the basement to the other. Rogers says, yeah, that's what I told the Detroit News when they were asking about the origin of the tapes. You saw them and said, hey, what are those? And you probably immediately knew there was something interesting there. What caught my eye was a label marked Goose Lake, which I had heard about from Glorious Noise founder Jake Brown's mom when we were growing up. It was a legendary music festival that took place 1 year after Woodstock and was the place to be for any Michigan rockers worth their weight in Faygo. The box had several tapes, some photos of Josh's dad with various musical pals, and one artifact I fear is gone forever. Glorious Noise says, I also remember your dad's funky ass 70s vest in there. Do you remember that? Rogers says, a vest? Oh, with the fringe. Glorious Noise. Yeah. Do you still have that? Rogers. I don't think so. It's truly tragic to think of the things that maybe had followed us to that basement only to be thrown away when we sold the farmhouse. Glorious Noise asks, so tell me, how did you end up getting the tapes and taking them to Chicago? Roger says, it was when my mom actually sold the house. I quote unquote claimed them when she was moving out of the main house and into the attached apartment. We were looking at this giant pile of stuff, and I said, I'll take the tapes. I remember her being upset with that because I couldn't take them right then. So she would have to hold on to them a while longer in the basement until I could retrieve them. It was probably another 2 or 3 years later when I had come to get them because my mom had sold the house. Glorious Noise says, and they were temporarily misplaced. Rogers says, there was a brief period where I had all the boxes, and I remember there was a box marked Goose Lake. Why is it not with the rest of them? I don't remember how it turned back up again. It was somewhere around this point that I pressed Josh to do something with these tapes before they were lost again. Because here's the thing. You may discover some media, but that media is not safe. That media is not stable. It's not stable. Lost media is not stable until it's been backed up and digitized. Until then, it's all hearsay, man, because you could thread it up into a machine and then all of a sudden, boom, it's frigging gone. So it's like, you got to take the steps. You know, whenever I make movies sometimes, and whenever I finish shooting for a day, I always say, head can't hit the pillow until that media exists in two separate places. Like, until it exists in two separate places, it doesn't exist. So that is crucial. So Glorious Noise is talking about how that they pressed Josh to do something with these tapes before they were lost again, either through a moving mishap or the ravages of time that degrade old tapes. I asked him if it would be okay for me to reach out to a couple labels I thought might be interested in something like this, or to at least look at the tapes over and see if they were worth transferring. Third Man Records was the first place we thought of. Third Man Records is Jack White's label down in Texas, I believe. Founded by Jack White with deep-rooted ties to Detroit. Oh, maybe it's in Detroit. I'm sorry, not Texas. And a track record for putting out historical recordings. And Goose Lake, that's really how you have to think about it. And that's how you think about a lot of these sort of recordings. Again, depending on the quality does not matter, because these recordings are telling a story. Sometimes they're verifying myth, and sometimes they're debunking the myth, right? Debunking, that's the word I've been wanting to use since we began this episode, and I just couldn't think of it off the top of my head. So Third Man seemed like a no-brainer. So I emailed them, and within 30 minutes, I got a reply from Ben Blackwell, Jack's nephew and co-founder of the label. Right away, Blackwell's musical geekdom was apparent. So here's the actual email from Ben Blackwell on Wednesday, September 13th, 2017 at 6:30 p.m. Hey, Derek, I was forwarded your email from my esteemed colleague, Ben Swank. As the in-house Goose Lake fanatic, all of this sounds incredibly intriguing to me. Shit, the first two names alone have me drooling. How do we go about moving forward from here? If necessary, I can send over pics of me wearing an original Goose Lake t-shirt, holding an original unused Goose Lake bumper sticker to prove my worthiness. I eagerly wait your reply. That's the type of like message you want to get from any record label, let alone Jack White's record label. Look at this t-shirt, this Goose Lake t-shirt. That's awesome. From there began a flurry of emails to assess what Josh actually had, what condition it was in, and whether he would be interested in working with Third Man on a potential release. Eventually, we were invited to Third Man Records HQ in it was in Nashville, of course. It was in Nashville, not friggin' Detroit or Texas. We were invited to Third Man Records HQ in Nashville so Blackwell could see the tapes for himself. Third Man Records is impressive, and not just because it's owned by Jack White. Every single detail in that joint is handled with such precision, with such aesthetic, that it kind of feels like a movie set from a harder edged Wes Anderson film. And they do so much in-house, and that they do so much in-house is amazing, considering that Third Man is a small operation compared to the majors, who seem to crank out fewer and fewer acts every year. Third Man is a throwback to when musicians and music lovers owned labels. It has a eclectic roster that maps much closer to the founder's musical taste than the prevailing commercial winds. It's basically what all of us when we were teenagers said we would ever do if we ever hit it big time. I'd buy a sweet clubhouse and invite all my favorite bands to play there. Well, that's what Jack White did. So here is Joshua Rogers at Third Man Records, the day that he delivered the Goose Lake tapes. There was one point where we were meeting with Blackwell in his office at Third Man that, by design or turn of conversation, seemed to seal the deal. He was telling a story about how, quote unquote, Jim got a big old kiss on the cheek from his grandma on a visit some time ago, and he pointed to a photograph on the wall. There was a sweet old face of a woman smashing the cheek of James Newell Osterberg Jr., more widely known as Iggy Pop. Glorious Noise says, what was your expectation of what was on the tapes? Rogers says, no expectation of at all. Hoping for the best, but expect the worst. I didn't think we'd pull anything usable off those tapes. Blackwell was more optimistic. I mean, this is the beauty. I mean, the chances of anything, A, being on those tapes, B, being in a condition where it could be lifted and played, it's just insane, dude, let alone a legendary performance. And now it's preserved and it exists and it's documented history. I mean, it's just fucking incredible. From myth to history, man. It really is. It's fucking incredible. Blackwell was more optimistic. From the outset, he knew the importance of the show to the Stooges' legacy and was determined to answer some long-held questions. I mean, it's not even just like, oh, we're listening to history. We get to answer a question that was unanswerable by history. Was Dave Alexander competent that day on the bass, or was he not? It's fucking incredible. Blackwell says, I was super optimistic at the onset of this conversation. I legitimately expected that if there was usable audio, that Third Man would be releasing the live Stooges recording. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If I had the power to summon a recording of any show in the Stooges history, I've no doubt that Goose Lake would have been the first on that list. The legend that Dave Alexander never played a note of bass on stage in front of 200,000 people is just so juicy, so strong, and almost impossible to believe. And as the tape bears out, it wasn't true. That's right. So what the tape reveals is that, the legend is that Dave didn't play his bass, or that he just he for whatever reason, too drunk, too fucked up, too self-conscious, and they fired him. But when you listen to the recording, he's playing bass. Not only is he playing bass, but the one who really seems to be shitting the bed is actually friggin' Rock Action. Rest in peace. Rock Action, aka Scott Ashton, brother to Ron and drummer of the Stooges, man. He is eating it so hard on Loose at the beginning. They start to congeal, they start to come together more as the recording goes on. And there, like I said, there are some wild moments on that record, particularly on 1970 and Funhouse, specifically Funhouse. It's just so great. That Steve McKay on the sax, it's amazing. It's friggin' amazing. But the legend that Dave Alexander never played a note of bass on stage in front of 200,000 people is just so juicy, so strong, almost impossible to believe. And as the tape bears out, it wasn't true. But what if the tapes had degraded? What if the sound quality is garbage? What if it's mislabeled or, God forbid, been taped over? For weeks after our visit to Nashville, we waited for word as to how the digital transfer went. And then we got an email from Ben Blackwell, Friday, December 15th, 2017 at 12 p.m. Hey guys, I just got back the transfers. I've not gotten to listen to everything just yet, but what I have put ears to is pretty incredible, of utmost excitement. Could you imagine getting an email like that? How your ears must perk up. Some clips were shared, and sure enough, we had a clean recording from one of the most storied events in Michigan rock and roll history, of a seminal band about to pivot into the next crucial phase of their career. If you read this site, then you can imagine the sense of excitement we all felt. It seemed impossible that these tapes Josh and I had discussed for years were finally coming to light. It was an important moment to us, but also an important moment to Josh's late father, James, the sound engineer who captured the Stooges at Goose Lake, who died in 2005 and never got to see the release of this historic document. Glorious Noise says, how do you think your dad would feel about this whole thing? Rogers says he would love that something he had done is getting out there, but also that it has given us this journey, this access and view into the whole process. Dad was all about being able to get into places other people couldn't get into, and knowing people who could get him access and then showing that off. Haha. He would also love the release of the recording, the engineering prowess involved, and the view into the process given me and others this experience. Sorry, my voice is thrashed right now. It's really hard to talk. Blackwell says, in terms of fines, this is one of the more bonkers examples I've been adjacent to. The crux of the matter is, I have no doubt that shit near this level of importance is out there tucked away in forgotten places. But I'd imagine that 99% of the populace would see no intrinsic value in a reel-to-reel recording of the Stooges. So the actual existence isn't the issue. It's that someone as wise as Joshua and his family saved said artifacts and find the right partners to share them with the world. It really is amazing. And it does give me hope. It does give me faith. And the truth of the matter is, man, for years, I'm going to sidebar to an example where I can personally speak to, because I have been in this position with the Misfits, man. I went out and after their drummer, their first drummer had resurfaced, and I got to hang out with him for an afternoon. He played for me recordings of songs that we didn't even know existed. That day, I learned of Misfit songs that I didn't know existed. They were they only survived because Manny liked to tape his shows and play them back, kind of like he was reviewing a football game. That's the only reason why people know about the song Infant Stranger, Lullaby. Glenn's never spoken about them. Jerry's never spoken about them. It really does. And another one called Drive Me, which I once thought was Harpies in the Night. It's not, but it's a good one. And when you sit and you get to listen to something that just shouldn't exist, but does, it really does. It boggles the friggin' mind. It does. In any case, Rogers responds, I told Ben recently via email that I appreciate his enthusiasm as a fan and how it comes out in the press materials. And today, August 7th, 2020, 50 years to the day of the start of the festival, the Stooges live at Goose Lake 1970 is released to the world. Glorious Noise says, are there any other recordings in there that you're considering exploring or doing anything with? Roger says, I talked to Jimmy Fox of James Gang and Jem Targle of Third Power, and I gave them both copies of their shows after establishing they weren't to be distributed. They were both amazed to hear this legendary show they played 50 years ago. I listened to all that stuff again recently with that in mind. The one recording I am most interested in hearing are the 2 1-inch tapes of Teagarden and Van Winkle and Seeger at Hill Auditorium. Along with Goose Lake recordings, there are 230 tapes in all. Wow. If they're in the same condition, that could be an amazing show. We haven't gotten those transfers back yet, so we don't know. Glorious Noise asks, what are you going to do with the tapes now? Roger says, they're sitting in storage now. If an opportunity comes to transfer some more stuff, I sometimes think of reaching out to Numero Group or Rhino and seeing if there's any interest. I'm hoping some of the other stuff gets heard in some way. It's a document of a really neat event. In addition to the Stooges set, there are recordings of several others from the Goose Lake Festival, including Chicago, James Gang, John Drake Shakedown, Litter, Mitch Ryder, Mountain, Peter Walker, Rock and Roll Ensemble, Ram, Third Power, and Tea Garden and Van Winkle. So maybe the story isn't quite over. And there's some more. There's just some stuff. It really is a legendary. The story of the show is legendary. The process itself is legendary. For this show, I revisited the Goose Lake session. And I got to tell you, man, as I said, you can hear that Dave is very competently playing bass notes on dirt, man. I mean, is it perfect? Is everybody firing on all cylinders? No, not even Iggy, but it's like, it's raw, it's sloppy, it's rock and roll, and it's competent. Whatever reason they decided to fire Dave Alexander, it wasn't because he wasn't playing his bass. It could have been a personality issue. We were talking the other day about Elvis Ramon, aka Clem Burke, and why he washed out of the Ramones. And a rock and Rolling Stone article, very irresponsibly, in my opinion, claimed that he couldn't keep time. And I was just like, that's bullshit, man. And so I went to the recording. And I listened to it, and I'm like, he's playing just fine. Let's just put it this way. I'm not going to say who. I spoke to I shared this recording with a very, very, very inner circle member of the Ramones camp, very inside person of the Ramones camp, who personally said to me upon hearing said recording, if you hadn't told me this was Clem, I would have thought this was any of the Ramones. That it could have been Marky or Tommy. So the idea that Clem Burke, aka Elvis Ramon, didn't work because he couldn't keep up is bullshit. It's not true, despite people thinking that. He's an incredible drummer. I did a whole show on it. I don't have to sit here and rehash it. But the point is that there's plenty of evidence out there that suggests that he absolutely could have kept up with the Ramones. And upon hearing the recording, that is absolutely the case. He is not struggling to stay ahead of the band or in simpatico with the band. I mean, is everything is everything a little awkward? I mean, sure, he's with no rehearsal, that'll happen. Or barely any rehearsal. And for Dave Alexander, getting loaded, being an alcoholic, getting in front of 200,000 people to play. I mean, things happen. But in this case, the recording sort of exonerates this mythology that's been sort of hung around his neck, And I'm happy for his memory in that kind of way, because Dave Alexander's bass is friggin' legendary, man. I mean, what he did, what he was a part of that chemistry, man. All you got to do is just listen to Funhouse, and you'll know what I'm talking about. And that's it. That is tonight's show. I got nothing else to say. Have you listened to Goose Lake? What do you think? Let me know. Like, share, subscribe. Check out my new documentary, Kuyashi Gonzo. Link is down in the description or pinned in the live chat. Open it up in a new tab and give it a watch. I would appreciate it. That's all. Peace. Hair grease. We'll see you next time.